Did we just start off? I didn't know if you did like a welcome to no future.
Like an intro where you are, you know. Welcome, you guys.
Those on the World Wide Web.
I'll say it. Welcome to No Future Gallery right here in Japantown. Yay. All right. So I'm Joe Miller, and I'm here with Stephen Rubalcaba. All right. Applause is good, yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And first off, I want to congratulate you on the show, you know, and all of the red dots that we're surrounded by here. That's pretty impressive as well. Like work appreciated and work going to new homes. All right.
Yes.
So yeah, kind of thrilling, kind of heartbreaking. I know, as you said. Yeah. So I want to get into the show just a little bit here about what's kind of behind some of this, because there's a little bit, to me, like science going on here. There's a little bit of urban planning. There's a little bit of meteorology, you know. There's sound recording technology. I know it's a big question, but how did those things come together, or am I reaching on any of that?
Well, let me see where to start unpacking that. Good question, and I guess I'll begin with what is it? Like, I guess my main concept was well, number one, I'm born and raised in this area, and we moved around a lot, my family and I, when I was younger. So a lot of these streets or intersections were something that I kind of wanted to recreate or redevelop or reconstruct, right? Into something that I wanted to see. And a big inspiration for me, I'm sure I'm not original or unique in this, but it's music and sound and melodies. And I've been having these obsessions on taking apart this old tech, these old tapes, and kind of reincorporating them or reconstructing them into some geometry in the shape of a cityscape or a future one. And I started making all these pieces, believe it or not, maybe 5-6 weeks ago. Last week of January is when I started making them. And you know, we've been having a lot of rain here in San Jose. And to help show the cityscape, I wanted to create somewhat of a skyscape. And I'm obsessed with clouds and all the varieties that we have of them. And with all the rain, I didn't really plan on doing this intricate of cloud pieces, but I was just so inspired by all the big, beautiful clouds that we've had over the last several weeks. Every time I would open up my workspace, i.e. my garage door, I would be able to stare out into the west and see these beautiful, you know, cumulonimbus clouds, which they're rain clouds, you know, they're the real thick ones. They go real high up into the atmosphere. And even some of these, one of them is called, where is it at? I think it's that one. That one's called the nimbostratus cloud, which also, you know, is really high in the atmosphere, and again, another rain cloud. But I love the big puffy and cotton candy-like clouds, and I was like, what the hell, let's put it all together and make something. Let's make a little world. And that's kind of what I've done.
Yeah. So I want to go to the cassettes for a bit, because for me, cassettes really were kind of a game changer in sound creativity. It sort of opened it up for everybody to record things, and I had a little, you know, recorder where you would record TV shows and play them back, even, you know, before you could tape them. Just to show how old I am, you know, before video cassettes, you know. But anyways, that meant that artists could do sound magazines, and you could produce 10 of them, or you know, or 5 of them, where you couldn't like cut a record yourself. Mm-hmm. So garage bands to people just doing spoken word and plays on cassette. So is any of that in your history with that? Because I see that, you know, even the shirt there, which is part of your collection as well. So what is the cassette tape to you?
Well, to me, like, when I think of the cassette tape, it kind of brings me back to the 80s, the 1980s, for y'all that can think back that far, or imagine what it was like. And I even have older memories of, you know, my mother's here, of my folks and their 8-tracks. They had 8 tracks, which are much larger types of cassette tapes. but cassette tapes are everything to me. I can bootleg music from the radio. You know, you just hit record, then you can pause it. I used to listen to Hot 97.7. 106 is still around. I mean, I've listened to a lot of alternative rock in the past too, but when I think of cassette tapes, I think of, the beginning of me kind of just farting around and trying to figure out who I was in the early to mid 90s. I was always on public transportation, and I always had my headphones on. I was buying cassettes, mainly music cassette tapes. I wouldn't really be able to buy them from the music stores, i.e. Tower Records. What's the other one? The Warehouse, I think it was called. I can't think of the name.
Streetland?
And even Tower Records. But I remember buying them from the swap meet or the flea markets. They're always dirt cheap. I never knew if they were authentic or real. But that's where I remember starting a lot of my collection of a lot of 90s hip hop type of stuff. And even, me and my friends, like somebody would buy the tape, I would buy a pack of blank tapes and I would do the dubbing. So you'd buy the authentic, purple tape from Raekwon back in the 90s, and then I would bootleg it and knock it off and play it in my Walkman. Even if it was a fast forward only Walkman. So the tapes were a big thing for me, just providing sound and melodies on my journeys of the bus systems, even when the light rails came out. And if my batteries were dying, then I was very angry or upset. But it was mainly music, and I would make my own mixtapes and give them away to people.
Yeah, I actually had an 8-track myself for about 2 weeks, and my mom bought me a stereo and had it for them. And then that one, fortunately, it broke. It failed, and so I brought it back and swapped it for one with a cassette. So lucked out in that technology. So about the neighborhoods, the only one that I don't know what it is or where it is Cocoa and Canfield. So where or what is Cocoa and Canfield?
So, well, you asked a good question.
It's right here, but yeah.
So Cocoa and Canfield. You're right. So all of these are real street names or real intersections here within San Jose. And this one was gonna be called Branham and Pearl. Branham and Pearl is a little neighborhood in South San Jose. It was where, when I first moved out on my own, I had no roommates. I was gonna say I didn't have no parties and nonsense, but that just ain't true. There was parties and nonsense over there. But it was one of the first places that I moved out on my own. I remember from there moving out of my mother's garage where I lived at prior to, which was fantastic because I had my own side door. It was a garage without any drywall. Let's not get confused here. So yeah, it was cold. And then when I first moved out on my very, very own, it was on Branham and Pearl. The specific street was Canfield Court. And back then, my partner Linda, who was also here, there was some silly game, or one of these Mad Libs where you filled something out. It's like, okay, choose the first name of your family pet, which was our dog named Coco, and then your street name, which was Canfield. So my actor name was Coco Canfield, and we had a little fun with it to have like a little inside thing between Linda and I, so we named this piece Coco and Canfield. So it doesn't, but then it kind of does really exist.
And now we know all your bank passwords.
That's right, of course. But I changed the numbers at the end. This time it's 2023, so make sure you enter that. Don't fucking lock me out, please.
Oh man, no, that's a fantastic story, and a fantastic sort of imbalance, especially in that particular piece. So there's some of these that are kind of precarious and some that look like more stable. Is that a little bit how you see the neighborhoods? Like some are on the verge of maybe it's gonna get kicked over, or is it just that you want it to seem magically soaring? Is there a vulnerability to it, or is it just like future greatness, or a mix, I guess?
That's a great question, Joe. I mean, like a lot of the places, so I grew up, a lot in East San Jose, We lived in West San Jose, even in South San Jose, but for the most part when I was young, I grew up in the East Side. And you know, some of the neighborhoods that I grew up at, they weren't always the nicest, or weren't always the best kept up. And you know, I wanted to kind of show and shed new light on some of those neighborhoods. And you know, you're right, some of these are pretty absurd. I really wanted to defy gravity in many ways, kind of like the people in those communities. You know, we have to defy a lot of odds, we have to persevere. You know, we kind of have to dig ourselves out of those fucking gutters and you know, work really hard, no matter what obstacles are in front of us. But some of these I kind of really wanted to create. Well, let me just rewind. This body of work, hi Ice Cream Man. This body of work here, I allowed myself to kind of not obsess, which I can do a lot when I'm working on things, creating. I can obsess and sometimes torment over the placement, over the colors, over the shapes. And you know, a friend here, his name is Fernando, reminded me, you know, as I was pitching this show to the gallery, you know, he was like, just make sure you have fun. And it's interesting how, you know, I've heard those words before. And the way that he shared those words and the simplicity of them just reminded me to have fun. And I didn't have much time to create this body of work, so I had to have fun. And you know, in a world that's not always that calm, it's not always that stable, I was able to create this own sense of calm while I was working on this stuff. Even some of these, you know, I had to, it's funny, before we started airing, I had some pieces that were kind of wedged in here that I used just to kind of stack up and keep something straight so the glue would adhere. But, you know, yeah, I really wanted them to look like they were defying gravity. And, you know, I don't know anything about engineering or architecture, but if y'all do, I dare you to try to make some of this pretty please. You know, but yeah, it's just kind of something how I would like to imagine the future of these very neighborhoods that I was stomping around, which feels like not even that long ago. I think or hope that answers the question.
Yeah. No, and our architecture could use it. We have too many flat building tops, like in downtown San Jose. It's weird. But yeah, no. So I wanted to go like you were back into the past a little bit here, because I came from a town and neighborhoods and that sort of thing, and even a family, not that you did, that wasn't thinking much about art and that, you know, like creative things were sort of secondary to like a trade, you know, like learning a trade and getting something basic, you know, in your education was kind of like the mindset. And but I met some people who kind of got me into thinking creatively and thinking like it's okay to think about type and art and whatnot. But what was early experiences in, you know, for you in art, or what kind of shoved you to making things basically, especially out of those environments which we both talked about in the past?
Well, I mean,
was there like an influencer in your life, or?
There certainly was. So, as a young kid, I grew up seeing my mother being very creative. Her mother was very creative and crafty, dare I say that. And I remember being, you know, also young, in elementary school, my father would send me artwork. You know, my father was around, you know, half the time of me growing up, I'd say, you know, in and out of the, I don't know, the law system or whatever. But he would send me a lot of artwork on my birthdays. He'd send me pictures, happy birthday, I love you, this and that. And he would send me all these cool drawings. And what I would do is I would copy these drawings and I'd show them to my friends in elementary school. And I learned real quick that, people like this. And people like you for this, which was a new and interesting thing for me, because as a kid I was always very awkward and strange, like, you know, probably most of us, but you know, I had a stutter, which didn't help. I was always very skinny. So, you know, having somebody like what I was drawing was a big motivator in some strange way. I felt accepted. I was like, oh, hey. And that's kind of what got me in at a real young age, is seeing my mom make stuff, her mom makes stuff, and it seemed to bring joy to them. And you know, my dad was making me stuff, and I was kind of copying it and showing my friends, saying I did it. And that's kind of where it all, I guess, began in many ways at a real young age.
Yeah. Yeah, actually same here. I was encouraged to just kind of draw as like sketchbook sort of stuff and on vacation and that. But so what was the first place that an artwork was actually shown? What was that? Was that like a school experience or later? Like where did your first piece in I guess a gallery, even if the gallery was at even if the gallery is at a school or in a hallway or something like that, or what? What do you recall?
If you want to call the city streets a public gallery, that would
okay, yeah, it does. Well, that counts.
I mean, you know, in the '90s, I discovered hip hop, right? Like, which I didn't realize until only an adult how important that was to me. You know, there's 4 elements of hip hop for y'all that don't know it. There's the emceeing components, there's the DJing, there's the breakdancing, and then there's like, you know, the graffiti or the art fools. And I was one of the art fools. And you know, I fell for, you know, the melodies of the music. I fell for the poetry. I liked the clothing that these fools were wearing, and I loved being able to write my name on stuff, even though I wasn't supposed to.
So, and what was that handle?
I used to write notes, N-O-T-E-S.
Okay.
But before that, I had a handful of other crappy handles that I probably won't share. But that was the main one since, like, I don't know, mid-90s, 96 or something.
Okay, yeah, so statute of limitations
94.
over...
Yes. Yeah, and my mom could maybe account, I mean, I got in trouble one too many times, so I was like, okay, shit, let's pick something else up. I picked up a paintbrush and a canvas forever ago. And then fast forward 20 years, you know, I'm chopping wood, taking apart tapes, still using a lot of spray for some of the colors. Only now, instead of obsessing on making straight lines with spray paint, which I cannot do, making these perfect blends, I can kind of cut it up with my miter saw and still do the lovely spray that I really enjoy to mess with and play with. But as far as the gallery, my goodness, I was thinking about this, and I have a brief answer, because I think that the very first time I got an opportunity to show at an art gallery was the first time I can recall was in 2008, when Works Gallery was on South 1st Street. It was a group exhibition, and I showed a painting of mine, and I was fucking over the moon. I was like, oh my God, I got my artwork in a gallery, which was fantastic. It was a great feeling. But that is one of the first times I remember showing my artwork in a legitimate way.
I did not know the answer to that question going into it, but
yes.
Yeah, and now we're both on the board of directors of Works.
Hey, stop by.
All right. Yeah, come on over. Yeah, so your work has been in these certain veins a little bit since I've known you. Like there was the sort of bird grid vein and the notes, nizotes kind of thing, and now we've got this grid construction, which you did some over at Works as well. Do you see a next thing here, or a continuation of what we're up to here, or is there something that this would transition into, you think?
Well, you know what, Joe, you asked a good question. I mean, I see all kinds of things in my mind rattling around. I have a lot of concepts that I'd like to unpack here, and like with this body of work, you know, usually I've been participating in a handful of group exhibitions, so I'll show one, maybe 2 pieces, and a lot of the times I'll get inspired to make something new, depending on what it's called. Like, you know, what's this exhibit all about? So I can get inspired quite easily sometimes if I feel very passionate about something, or a string of words together, or a single word. And with this body of work, I was like, oh shit, okay, I don't have to crowbar every idea into a couple of pieces. I can kind of create, you know, a broad breadth of work. So that was tremendous for me to be able to do. Each piece I finished in this series, I was like, shit, this is the best. This is the best one. This one's the best, until I would finish the next one. And usually I don't feel like that. I'm like, nah, you know, this one's all right. But I've been allowing myself to dream real big. And, you know, you hear these ideas of, oh, you know, pie in the sky idea. Fuck it, I'm going for the pie in the sky. And I want to do more artworks like this, although I'd love to go a little bit bigger. I would love to have somebody who's a little bit smarter than me, maybe has an engineering degree, maybe has an architectural degree, but I've seen these structures that have these beautiful shells of sort around the building, and I have all these images in my mind of creating these giant shells of sorts around these structures, whether it be, I don't care what the structure is, just let me make some shit look really, really nice on the outside. But I can see things going that big. And, you know, like I've really been trying to visualize myself making these decisions like, hey, this is the wrong wood, asshole. You know, you got the wrong wood, bro. I told you to get this wood. And you know, like I'm really trying to like feel it, make it happen. But yeah, you know, like I can see, I mean, I love these materials. I think I found my materials 42 years later. I finally found something I love working with. I love the organic matter. I kind of love locking it in the math, right? And then adding these nostalgic objects from my past and my childhood. And you know, I have so many ideas that are there that I just need opportunities and motivation and inspiration to unpack them. I mean, I love to make art all day long and all the time, but I got a job. You know, I have a job where it's like 8 to 5. I have a family. So yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that last part was something that that I told you I was going to ask you about a little bit. Is you know, like sort of the perennial question for us in, you know, work and artists, and work as artists, but we also, you know, work another kind of job, whether that's related closely to creativity or it's just like, you know, doing the job to pay bills or that. Where your job is actually quite interesting to me, but how do you see that balance? Like, how was it with this show, putting together a lot of things, finding time to still be with family, and the work and your work? How is that balance, and how do you see that for you?
Well, I'm not a good juggler. In my mind, it sounded easy. I was like, oh, you know, you go to work 8 to 5 and you come home and work on shit. It wasn't always that like that, although, you know, with all the support I was given from my partner and my family, I was like, yo, you know, for this next month, I'm gonna kind of be hunkered down, you know, working on stuff, just unpacking these ideas. And, you know, they were tremendously supportive for me. They were feeding me. You know, a lot of the times when I'm kind of in the zone, I guess, you know, I can kind of work past meals. I can work past getting stuff done. I mean, I took time, and at my job, you know, my 8 to 5 job, I work at a nonprofit. I've been there for, since 2010. We help and advocate for the aging community here in Santa Clara County. And, you know, I love it. I love helping folks. It makes me feel good. And, you know, that balance can be tricky sometimes, you know, because I hear a lot of unfortunate stories from people, you know, that I live next to. You know, they're my neighbors. And, you know, that can be very difficult for me. So it's very helpful for me to be able to kind of turn off the noise. And one thing that helps me do that is when I'm creating, when I'm making stuff. Just turn some music on and I can kind of like really turn stuff off and kind of focus on making shit. And, you know, again, the support that I get from my family has been tremendous. You know, like, my voice is getting a little shaky here just because, you know, they really have come through for me over all these years. the rule was, okay, after this show, I'm gonna focus and shift gears and spend more time with my family. So I've been trying to be more present with my partner. I'm cooking dinner nowadays. I'm visiting my mom and brother and sister and my nieces and nephews. And that's been fantastic. And I'm still making time to pull up over here and show up and answer some questions and share what's rattling around in here. But yeah, the balance can be tricky, as it is right now. But we make it work, and it makes me feel good showing up to work, helping folks, and then it makes me feel a different type of good when I can show up and create things. I've turned these thoughts into something that you can touch and see and like move around. I think is interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, speaking of questions, I've asked a lot, so questions from the room.
Well, everybody's an expert on it. I can tell.
Which sculpture or which street is one of your favorites?
Interesting. Well, how about
I know every next one was the best one, but which one?
I guess it would be the last one then.
Well, I'm gonna cheat that answer. It's I really gravitated towards these pixelated clouds. Like I really didn't envision them coming out. Like I gotta show you all the prototype that I had for this. It looks ridiculous. Like I'll post it online. Like it looks nothing like this. It was very simpler, and it even had angles on it. But I was inspired by the best creator of all, which is Mother Nature. I mean, she was raining on us, bringing us all this moisture, making all the trees and grass green. I can't wait for all the wildflowers to bloom out here. Quick, free, you just go drive and you see some beautiful shit. But the clouds that were forming and bringing all this rain really inspired me to just bring some real depth to those pieces. And plus I'm obsessed with clouds anyways. You always catch me staring up at the sky. I mean, there's all kinds of beauty you can see if you just look up. Those ones were probably my favorite, but to not skirt the question, where I currently live right now is pretty much by Tully and McLaughlin. I live pretty much right down the street of that intersection, but this one here, and I'm the artist, so I can go ahead and pick it up here. But this is the one that was like one of my favorites. I just really enjoyed the play of the wood grain. I kind of was just playing with it. I brought in some plexiglass and the classic Maxell 90-minute blank tape that has some tunes on there. But this one was one of my favorites, probably just only because I live there right now. And there's all kinds of, one of my favorite taco trucks is right there. But good question, yeah. But other than that, man, I can tell you stories and why I like each little street or intersection I mean, there's a variety of reasons, and depending on when you ask me that question, the answer might be different. So.
How much of your work do you find is like pre-imagined versus like looking up at the clouds and all of a sudden that kind of shifts the direction of something? Like do you see it more worked out in your mind, or do you feel it more working out and revealing something to you along the process?
Well, you know what? That's a great question. It's actually a combination of both. Like, for example, each of these architectural type pieces, I had an idea. It's like, okay, this one's not gonna have any angles. This one's only gonna have, 90-degree angles, and I'm gonna add these colors or only these types of wood. So I'd have a rough outline of what I want it to look like, or kind of, not even what I want it to look like, what I want it to feel like. And more so, it's like, okay, what music do I imagine or hear in this neighborhood? What shit was I listening to when I was farting around in this neighborhood? And so these ones I would kind of have more of an idea, but even after saying that out loud, like that's not even always true. Like when I was making these clouds, I was kind of obsessing on, oh, you could only have these shapes, and you could only, I was putting myself in a box. I was like, okay, you could only do this, only these colors, only that, and then I was getting so frustrated with myself and getting nowhere real fast. I was like, fuck this. I'm just gonna turn on my dumb little camera, i.e. my phone, put on a time lapse, and then just go. I'm not gonna think about what I'm gonna glue where. If I put something here and I like it, I'm committed. And that's kind of what I did. I allowed myself to just commit to these ideas and not obsess, not kind of, is this sick? Are people gonna like this? Fuck it, let's just go. So with those ones especially, and maybe that's why I kind of liked those ones the most, is because I was at my most, it was just coming out of me. And even the last one was this one, this cumulonimbus one. This one was the very last one I finished out of all of these pieces. And I was like, oh shit, this one is hard. Although this one is the best one. And, you know, because I was like, you know, I wasn't really feeling the pressure, and I finished it maybe like, I don't know, 24 hours before I had to have stuff here. So, but that one was really freeing to make. And it was just kind of flowing through me, which was fantastic. So, and with my paintings, I never feel that way. So that's how I know that I'm on to something, because it makes me feel good. And I don't have to think too much. I'm just like, if you like it, then just do it. Like, you know, if you don't like it all that much, well, then make another one. You know, come through with something else. But that's kind of how these bodies of works have evolved. The more I was stressing over shit, it wasn't coming out that nice. So I was like, okay, don't stress. I thought of what Fernando said, just have fun. And I just started having more fun.
Yeah, and to me, grids are kind of freeing. I don't know if that's what you feel about that, but you know, you said in a box, but grids are magic.
Well, there's something about the math that I love. Like, there's something about whether it's symmetrical, and I love the asymmetry, but it can't just be any asymmetry. It's got to be the best one, whatever that means. It's got to feel and look just right. But no, yeah, I mean, grids and math, and you know, think that brings me a sense of calm for whatever reason. It's just organized and it makes sense. Like, all of these pieces are exactly where they are supposed to be. Like, for real. Like, just like all of us here. Like, we're all supposed to be here for whatever reason. And thank you for being here, by the way.
And there was a question right
Yes.
there.
Yeah, so I was curious, you mentioned the miter saw. I was curious about some of the other tools that you used to kind of make this come together.
So let me think about this. I used a lot of miter saw. I did a shitload of sanding. By sanding, I used sanding sponges. I used electric sanders. What other tools did I use? And just some basic like screwdriver. But that's some of the tools that I used. But other than that was kind of it. But I used a variety of adhesives. I used wood glue. I used super glue. I used some crap called liquid nails to adhere the plastic to the wood. Oh, and I used a nail gun also. So what I was really trying to do was hide how I made this stuff. So if you look real close, you may or may not see the glue. You may or may not see nail guns coming in from underneath. But I wanted to hide the magic, so to speak. But yeah, that's kind of some of the tools that I've used. And that's kind of it. Like, me getting my hands on a miter saw was a game changer to me. And I was doing silly home projects, trying to make a shelf. Now I'm making this kind of shit. So getting a miter saw was like, it's like I would have, if you would have asked me a few years ago, Steve, are you good? When will you have a solo show and what's it going to be? I would have never guessed that it's not going to be paintings of some sort, maybe with the music notes and the little birds and the pixelated landscapes or skyscapes that I was painting. And it's going to be stuff out of wood and tapes. I would have been like, you are out your mind. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But getting my hands on a miter saw, which a friend gave me, was like, I mean, it changed it changed the trajectory of my craft for the better. But yeah, so get your hands on a miter saw.
It is locked at 45.
Well, these ones are all 45. There's some other pieces that I would do different angles, but these ones I kept all the one 45-degree angle on these ones, which was fun.
What would be your top 5 songs for a mixtape or soundtrack?
Top 5 songs. Well, I've been listening to. Oh my God! I mean, this is such a hard question because I love so many songs. So the ones that will rattle off are just some songs I've been jamming to recently. There's this music producer named Fat John, where. And by the way, if you ever follow me, I'm always trying to curate my posts and my stories and my this and my that. I'm always trying to share new sounds. I mean, if someone shows me new fucking music that I like, I'm like, thank you, like, you know. And so that's what I'm trying to do. But so I like this artist named Fat John. There's this song named Shared Dreams that I think is fantastic. It's just an instrumental type song. And I know I mentioned it earlier, but for some reason or another, a member of the Wu-Tang Clan named Raekwon, he came out with his debut solo album, I don't know, sometime in the mid-90s. I was going to Oak Grove High School. I think I was I was a freshman or a sophomore. I didn't go there long. I got booted out of there. But he had this tape. It was called the Purple Tape, or well, that's what a lot of fools from the streets called it. It was only built for Cuban links. But like any song on that tape are of my top 5. What else have I been listening to? I've been listening to a lot of Sir, S-I-R. I can't pick any favorite song, but I like the song called The Evils, which is fantastic. And what else? I guess that's all I got for now. I'm sorry, I couldn't name 5. Follow me on the social medias. You'll hear all my favorite songs.
So earliest hip hop, East Coast or West Coast?
Well, it's funny. So a lot of my family, like my uncles, introduced me to West Coast fools like Mac Mall, Mac Dre, all the Macs, right? I mean, and obviously nobody had introduced me to Dr. Dre and the Snoop Dogg shit. I mean, that was just everywhere. But I also was vibing on a lot of East Coast. I liked the lyrics out there, and I kind of liked the sounds that were coming out of a lot of the East Coast hip-hop sound and raps. So back in the 90s, I had a ton of East Coast tapes. I'm going way back then, so like every single Wu-Tang album or every single solo project. I mean, a lot of the fools out there like Buckshot I used to listen to. I used to listen to even some West Coast fools like Hyro. I was a huge fan of. Del, the funky Homo sapien from Hyro, was one of my favorites. But yeah, a lot of East Coast, now that you mention that I was vibing on way back in the day. De La Soul.
For me it was all East Coast. I started to discover West Coast when people started talking about it here more, and the history started coming up a lot more. But yeah, for me it was older, like Grandmaster Flash.
Oh man, yeah.
Guys and Shango and yeah.
Well, I love those videos.
Still around. Yeah. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank y'all for coming over.
One more. Speaking of social media, you go by Nizotes on Instagram. Is that officially your artist name, or do you go by Steve? And if you can tell any backstory on, it sounds like just the word Nizotes is probably a play on what you discussed about loving music so much. But is there any history there that you want to share, or how that relates to you as an artist?
You ask a good question. The short answer is, no, I'm joking. So, I mean, I think the question was asked earlier. When I used to do illegal graffiti, I used to write notes, like, take notes, music notes, essentially. And when I started sharing stuff on social media, the only reason I have a social media is to kind of like share my artwork. And I was like, okay, and I actually thought about it. It's like, do I go by, my name is Stephen Leon Rubalcaba Jr. So there's a lot of syllables in there. And I'm like, shit, well, nobody's gonna know how to spell my name. It's gonna get, ruined. And by the way, if you Google that name, there's some like Mexican musician that comes up. And that ain't me. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll go by the moniker, instead of Notes. I was like, let's go by Nizotes. Kind of made me think of that West Coast type stuff. And then I thought of like the B-side, it's the remix of Notes. It's not the graffiti on the streets. It's like, shit that you can see hanging up on a wall or sitting on a platform. So I don't know, just to make it fun, I made it Nizotes. And that's kind of all I got for that.
Yeah, man. Well, when I was growing up, there was that little thing that you did. Well, some people did, Wizuts is up. That's
Yeah, so I had, this...
People just talk that way all day long. I mean, like elementary school.
Yeah, like I think that was this thing. Like I think Snoop Dogg and E40 do all of the, you add an is to anything, and like that's what it is. So yeah, there is a lot of that flavor in there too. So thanks Snoop and thanks E40, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's a fun question. So yeah, just trying to keep it fun. But I respond to all. I respond to Niz. I mean, some of my homeboys from way back then still call me Notes. My dad's name is Steve, so when I'm around family, I go by Steven. Nizots, I mean, as long as your tone is appropriate, I'll respond. So say hi and wave at me if you see me out in the street sometime.
All right. Anybody else waving a question? There we go one. All right.
So you talked a little bit about your inspiration with like the wood and the materials. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that? Because it seems like going from paint to wood is quite a leap.
Yeah. So the materials, well, it's funny, I've started working with wood a few years ago, and it mainly started just from like scraps of wood from my home projects. And I was like, oh, okay, this is fun. And then for this body of work, for example, thank you for asking, Melinda. As you know, you and I recently moved. We acquired a new home here in San Jose, like a half a mile from our old spot. I'm pretty much again by Tony McLaughlin. But once we acquired this house, there was a bunch of old abandoned wood in the background. I mean, in the backyard, excuse me. And at first glance, I was like, trash, trash, trash. And then once I got this opportunity, I was like, well, let me not throw it in the trash. Let me see what I can do with it, if anything. And it was a 4x4, a big giant pole of sorts. And I ended up cleaning up that wood. I sanded all corners to bring and breathe like new life into it. So I used some wood found in our home. Some friends had donated wood. Like I have a friend who's a general contractor. He donated all of this beautiful. I'll go ahead and pick this one up. Whoa. Here, okay, I won't pick up that one, but I'll go ahead and pick this one up. Yeah, this one's kind of glued on there. But he donated all this beautiful redwood, walnut wood, and he gave me like a bunch of feet of it. And he gave me this a couple of years ago, and once I started cutting it and looking at all the grain, I was like, wow, this is fantastic. So some wood was given to me. You might catch me wandering around neighborhoods when I go on walks. I'm looking for like abandoned wood on the streets, but I've even found wood, cleaned it up, sanded it up. And there's even some wood from my miscellaneous home projects, but like I acquired the wood from a little bit of everywhere. And as I was cutting and sanding and cleaning this wood, it kind of reminded me like how special the materials actually were. I was like, oh shit, like I found this at my new house. Like I would have never been able to make this stuff had I not gone through all kinds of trouble for over a year trying to find a place to live. So it's so interesting how, you've heard this phrase, like, it is what it is kind of thing. And like, I love these ideas that like, we really are where we're supposed to be. Whatever hurdles we dealt with yesterday, last week, last month, last year, I guess we were supposed to be here. So like, it's strange just to know all of the paths and decisions I made in life brought me right here and allowed me to make all of these beautiful pieces. Like I couldn't see it any other way. So yeah, the materials are very meaningful to me. Even all the tapes are from my own collection. They all have shit on them. What they have on them is a mystery. But yeah, no, thank you for.
So now we got to rebuild some and listen.
Well, I'm waiting for the technology that we just scan the actual tape and then maybe it'll play. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, there's not going to be any more physical technology. But
Everything's in the cloud. Yeah, everything's in the Amazon cloud somewhere.
all right. Well, I want to thank Stephen for asking me to talk with him. That's like really sweet. Thank all y'all for coming out and now see the show. All right. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.